Great. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I guess so. Yes, that's good. My name is Juha. Originally Finnish, but I've been here in Singapore for 7 years now. What I'm here to talk about today is basically building and maintaining great studio culture. Just in short, I'll give a bit of background of myself, what I mean by culture, why I think it's important, and some of the building blocks of Nonstop Games studio culture, the studio that I was one of the co-founders and where I work currently at King. Good. So some background of myself. So as I said, I'm originally from Finland. It's kind of the hotbed of mobile games for some time. But I've now been here in Singapore for 7 years. So I guess nowadays I know my copy C from copy O, and can kind of know how to order. What's the difference between Mi Goren and Hokkien Mi. But yeah, that's about it. So we started Nonstop Games in 2011. It was originally an HTML5 game startup. And at that time, HTML5 was a really sort of big thing in technology. We went to raise some venture financing, so we raised 2 rounds and 3 million US in total from 2 European investors called Lifeline Ventures and Crandom. We launched a game, and we sort of kind of pivoted from the HTML5 games to App Store-based games. We launched a game called Heroes of Honor, which was the first strategy game with a real-time map where people could interact in the map and everything was happening in real time instead of asynchronously. We launched that in January 2014. It was picked by Apple as the editor's choice, of course was a big thing for a small studio like ours. And then later last year, we were acquired by King, and we've now been part of King for 8 months or so. My current title is head of studio, Nonstop Games at King Studio, and we've grown the studio over here to over 30 people and continuously recruit people to our studio to build great games. So this is not really an academic presentation about sort of corporate culture or anything, but I thought to start off it would be good to kind of define what do we mean by culture. And this is really sort of the first Google answer that I got. I didn't do more research than that. Basically, it's the collection of values, beliefs, and attitudes that characterize a company and guide its practices. And why I think culture is important, I think for me, fundamentally, I believe that the best games are made by happy, motivated people who are passionate about the work in a collaborative environment. And this is quite different from some other companies because I think everybody wants their work environment to be collaborative. Everybody wants their employees to be happy. But I fundamentally believe that the most important thing for the management is to set an environment where individuals and teams can thrive. I don't think that the best free-to-play games are sort of coming with kind of top-down direction or somebody high in there in the management kind of acting like a demigod and figuring out how to make games. But I believe that when you hire the best talented people and they're really, really motivated on doing those games, just to kind of ensure that they have the right environment and that will lead to the best games out there. So what are some of the the building blocks of the culture that we built at Nonstop Games? I think the first one is really having a mission that excites and unites people. I think it's both important that you set a direction for people. So for us, we're clearly being focused on free-to-play games, focused on mobile and tablet. Never done really anything on sort of console or downloadables and PC downloadables or anything like that. But I also think that the best people are not really that motivated by money, but they're motivated by doing something bigger. And I think this is especially true for people in sort of creative arts, like games are. I'm sure maybe in some other industries, maybe kind of investment banks come to mind. So some people might be more motivated by money, but I think in games, people are the primary motivation normally is not monetary. Of course, this doesn't mean that you can just like kind of sort of pay peanuts and just like give some pizza every 2 weeks and not pay real salaries. I think people, of course, they earn to have a decent living, and as we know, games can be a very profitable business. So I think that's understandable as well. But I think fundamentally, the most talented people want to do something else in their lives than just sort of earn a livelihood from games. I mean, they have a passion to create great games, games that are bigger than just like kind of making money. And I also think that like this has been like really central for us when we are hired people and when we run our business, because what I see that there's a lot of game companies who sort of just copy whatever is on the top grossing charts, because I think it's an easy way to success. But I think like with that strategy, you won't get the most talented people in your team, because the most talented people are not interested in just doing that. Another thing that I find like extremely important is basically building the environment of trust and empowering the teams to make decisions. So we typically work at Nonstop Games with pretty small teams, so our teams range from like 5 to 15 people. Teams are like quite autonomous in making their decisions, and I think like sort of my job is to create an environment for the teams to be able to make the best decisions. And I think also like pretty fundamental, like people are like talented and passionate people they have a need to make the right decisions. I don't need to be there to sort of control those decisions, but I believe that people fundamentally want to make the best out of their work. And then like micromanaging those decisions, it's just like counterproductive when you have the right people working for you. So in the teams that we work on, the game teams, they themselves make the decisions that affect their work. So sort of they decide on the game design. They decide on the tools and technology that they use, because that at the end affects their like day-to-day work. They decide on the content of the games and also on the schedule of the games. Obviously, there are like guidelines that we for example, aim not to start projects which are like kind of like 3 years long or sort of really massive. I mean, we have a model where we work at, but everybody understands that model, and then the game teams can make those decisions. And by having the game teams make the decisions, they are also also accountable for them. So I think that's kind of a very fundamental piece of sort of any kind of management advice, that it's hard to make people accountable for the decisions that they don't make. But when people make those decisions, I mean, it really empowers the teams and the individuals, and then they can be accountable for them. Furthermore, I think one of the really important things that's been like central to Nonstop Games, but also in King's culture, is being open and transparent. As you know, this industry is a lot about data and sort of making small adjustments, making A/B tests, making small changes to design mechanics and so on. So it's very crucial that everyone understands the free-to-play business model. I think in free-to-play, an individual designer or individual economy balancer or somebody who runs the business can make decisions that have a really big impact to your overall sort of business growth and revenue and so on. So it's very important that everybody understands the basics of the free-to-play business model. In the studio, we have everyone has access to all the game analytics. So everyone can see how Nonstop Games and King is doing day by day. This really means everyone, not only the people who are sort of working on those games, but everybody who is employed by us gets all the data. So that means also that everybody has an ability to change things for those games. Everybody has the ability to suggest things for the games, and I think this is really powerful, because it really enables the whole team to kind of take responsibility of their games. We also share the targets and the results with the whole studio. So everybody, I mean, it's no secret of what we're trying to do. And this also goes to the individual level. So the individual targets are public within the studio. Of course, I mean, these are sort of confidential outside of the studio, so I can't share those. But within the studio, within King, everybody knows what we're after. Because I see, like in a lot of more sort of centrally directed companies, it's a little bit of a secret what the company is trying to achieve, and you know how much the company might be making money and so on. But in our studio, we share all those data with everyone. And then we've made a habit of all the teams presenting, you know, their progress every Friday. So it's very transparent to everyone, like, you know, how the teams are doing. And this doesn't mean that all the teams, like every Friday, would have like a big win. I mean, sometimes sort of we backtrack, and sometimes we don't make progress, but we're still very transparent on that. And I think that has really benefited the whole studio. One of the things that we really believe in is sort of failing fast and cheap. I think no one in the games industry, or no one who is making games, wants to fail. And I think there's a stigma about failure. But I think in this industry, it's sort of mandatory for success to fail sometimes, because, as you know, the market really rewards the big winners so much. The games are made by, you know, fairly small teams, so it means that there's a lot of both like external and sort of internal competition to make those big hits, which means that a lot of the games that we start, they end up being cancelled before they hit the market. I think this is true for both like us before King, and it's true for King. It's true for any other game studio in the mobile free-to-play games. So for us to kind of reduce this stigma of failure, we created this practice that we have this cake, what is called the kill cake, that we have after every cancelled game, and that sort of makes it clear for everyone in the studio that even though we don't want to fail, we don't want to cancel, you know, products. It is just the nature of the business that it happens, and that also leads that we can make those decisions on canceling much easier. There's not you know, that fear of, okay, now we cancel this, like what will happen to my job and so on. But people understand that if you cancel a game, then that means that the game team is free to make another game that might be, you know, a much bigger success. And that has also helped us that the game which we have cancelled, they've been all like team decisions. So the teams have decided that they want to cancel that game, and I think this is extremely important that because the teams understand how the market works and how the business model works, they know that, okay, if this game is going, you know, kind of so and it's not going to hit those metrics or targets that we set for a game, it's just much better to cancel it at an early phase than, you know, to use another 6 months or 12 months to take to the market, and then realize that, you know, we just can't scale the game. And the teams feel sort of empowered to make that decision. Good. One of the kind of the last things that I sort of want to touch upon was sort of the small things. So I think in a lot of organizations it's kind of easy to have these talks of like, you know, failing fast and cheap when you're successful. Of course, it's, you know, much harder when you're kind of running out of money and you need to get something out, and you need to make those decisions. But also, I think like there are always, I think regarding corporate culture, there's always this sort of big words and so on. But at the end, a lot of things are about sort of small things. So small things like, you know, who has access to which folder? Do we have some, you know, sort of management folder where we keep all the decisions and important data, or can everyone access that? Are there like better kind of corner seats at the office that, you know, some of the people say that, or is that really sort of you know, kind of made for the benefit of the teams. What's the most best way to have the office plan, seating plan? How long does it take to get a software license or like a second monitor for a developer? And this is something that we, from the start when we started the studio, and of course now we have the backing of King, so buying a monitor or buying a license it's not really a big cost in the grand scheme of things. But even when we started Nonstop Games and we basically had no money, we made it a rule that whatever tools any developer or artist wants, they will be able to get that, and also that they will be able to get that, not like by waiting like, a few weeks, but whenever they need it, we just make time to buy that the people have the right tools. And I think this is, quite important that, because this at the end is, to me, is almost like a handcraft, is making games. So I think people need to have the tools that you want to work with to make those games. And then of course like things that are judged by the hours or by what you achieve at work. So is there a rule that okay, somebody is like sort of coming at 9 and then leaving at 5:30? Will they get the sort of bad looks from the management, or are you really judged by work? And I think these are important things that sort of need to be discussed within studios, because I think there are a lot of studios what I've seen that sort of say that they don't have a culture of crunching or whatever, but then when you sort of talk to the people, you sort of realize that if you're one of the guys who leaves a bit earlier, then you can't really go forward in your career. So I would say that even if the management sort of doesn't notice these things, the employees will for sure. And if you shy away from discussing these things, it's I think kind of will bite you at the end. And I think for me, especially as our studio has grown, the most important thing nowadays is almost to sort of steer our path and kind of clear all these like small obstacles and discuss the small things also, because they end up hindering your process of creating games. Great. So that was in short of what I think of some of the building blocks, how we've created the culture at Nonstop Games. So I'll kind of want to open it up for questions. Also remind you that we have a Nonstop Games King party, I think tomorrow at 8 p.m. So you're all very, very welcome to come over there.
Thanks, Juha. Some really good advice for any startup there, I think. We have got time again for 1 or 2 questions, if there's any in the crowd. I know I've got one. No? All right. Well, one thing I did want to ask about, I mean, obviously you were acquired by King, and an acquisition is a challenge for any internal studio culture, particularly one founded in independence. You had a relatively small team at the time. I mean, what advice would you give? Because again, we've got people who work at startups here, they might end up being in that position one day. What advice would you give for managing that transition? Like, how do you handle your staff? How do you reassure them about what's going to happen in the future?
Sure, I think that's a great question. So I think one important part is to sort of discuss the culture already during the acquisition process, because of course, like naturally in the acquisition process, there are like many things. There's like the valuation. There are all kind of other terms. So things like culture sort of go to the background easily, but I think it's good to explain like how you run your company and what you think is what are your values, and that's something that we discussed with King early on, and we kind of knew what their corporate culture was like, and then I think that the post-acquisition process is something that needs to be handled with care, because I think there is everybody has very good intentions, but when the acquirer is kind of so much bigger than your own company is, it's very important to keep everybody focused on the work and just kind of ensure that there are not sort of like big changes coming right away.
Maybe time for one more, if anyone has one. Well, I've got one more. If no one? Well, you started out as a HTML5 studio. I covered that myself around that time, 2010, 2011. It's still a really powerful idea, that idea of just sending somebody a link and immediately accessing the game. Do you ever think the pendulum's going to swing back towards that again? I mean, is there a future still for that?
Well, I think HTML5 has progressed a lot in for example, apps and you know, kind of mobile browsers, desktop browsers. I think currently, like, the games market is dominated by app stores as a distribution channel. So I think there's, in the short term, I don't think there's going to be many big changes. But I think we've all seen in this industry that, you know, when changes, you know, start to happen, with what happened with Facebook as a platform, what happened as a sort of app store as a platform, they can come really fast. So, you know, who knows in kind of 3 to 5 years.
All right, well, did you put your hands together? Thank you to Juha.